everyone. Welcome to the Global Gobeshona conference session on Ecard Loss and Damage Program. So as you know that Ecard has been at the forefront of loss and damage research for many years. And the notion that there will be some residual impacts of climate change that is beyond adaptation and mitigation is actually not a new concept. And with the hope of efficiently enabling the vulnerable countries and communities to understand and tackle loss and damage, ICCCAD has actually concretized an Ecard loss and damage program. So with that being said, I will now request Dr. Huck to give his welcome remarks so that we can start today's session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Nusrat, and good afternoon from Dhaka, Bangladesh, to all our live participants here today. While the Gobeshona conference is primarily on locally led adaptation and resilience, we are increasingly now moving beyond adaptation to having to deal with the losses and damages associated with the impacts of climate change that are now becoming evident, as we have seen from the IPCC 6th Assessment Report. Working Group 1 and Working Group 2 already have established that losses and damages attributable to human-induced climate change are now happening. At ICCCAD, we have been working on this issue for some time now, and we are going to increase our activities on focusing on loss and damage quite significantly. And even though it isn't the main theme of this Gobeshona conference, it is something that we cannot ignore. So we've had a few sessions on it, and this is one of them. And in fact, in the closing session, where we will have the two climate champions, climate champion for COP26, Mr. Nigel Topping, and climate champion for COP27, Mr. Mahmoud Mahieldin, I will put at least one question to them on how they propose to take the issue of loss and damage up in COP27. So even though loss and damage is not the primary topic of the Gobeshona conference, nevertheless, it is relevant, and therefore we have had a few sessions, including this one. So the purpose of this particular session is to share with our audience and friends the activities that ICCCAD has been doing, is doing, and plans to do going forward on the topic of loss and damage, which is now growing in importance and recognition. When it started, it was a very small topic. Not many people were involved. Now more and more people are getting involved in it, wanting to know it. It was a big issue in COP26 in Glasgow on the UN Framework Convention negotiations. We've had the Warsaw International Mechanism, and then we have now the Santiago Network, and then we have the Glasgow Dialogue. We had wanted a Glasgow facility, but we didn't get a facility. We got a dialogue. We will take that dialogue further and see if we can convert it to a facility for loss and damage finance by COP27. And then parallel to the UNFCCC process in Glasgow, we also had a very significant development led by the government and the people of Scotland, I would say, who initiated the Loss and Damage Fund from the Scottish government. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, first put £1 million on the table and then challenged others to match it. We got some matching funds, and then by the end of the COP, she put another £1 million on the table. So Scotland has offered £2 million to start working on loss and damage. It's the first money that we have seen, not inside the UNFCCC process, but is very specifically allocated to dealing with loss and damage. And we had a hand in persuading the government of Scotland to do that, working with Scottish civil society. And we'll hear a little bit about that from our colleagues and friends, Simon Anderson from IID in Glasgow, and also Bimal Regmi, who's been looking at the effects of that intervention with the Scottish government and Scottish civil society. I must add, it was a joint effort with both of them. At the same time, we are doing a lot of capacity building on loss and damage. We are doing research on loss and damage. And across ICCCAD, we have a number of colleagues working on different aspects of loss and damage. Today's session is to share and hear from each of them the different activities that they are involved in, what they've done already, what they're doing now, and what they're planning to do. And then at the end, we'll be very happy to take some questions and answer people if they have any further queries on any of what they hear. So back to you, Nusrat. Let's hear from all our speakers, and then I'll come back towards the end.
Yes, thank you, sir, for the great remarks. So I'll just share my screen so that we can start the presentation. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes. Go ahead.
So hi everyone again. So basically, as Dr. Akmal has mentioned, we are going across the different domains that ICCCAD loss and damage program is currently undertaking. So we'll start with the first domain of action, that is the UNF Triple C domain that is being led by Mr. Hafiz Khan. He is an environmental lawyer working to promote climate justice for a number of years. He is also a member of the WIM Executive Committee as of now, and he's leading the UNF Triple C loss and damage domain in ICCCAD. So Mr. Khan, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Nusrat. Hello, everyone. So as you know, that this session would be focusing on the Ecard loss and damage program. So I would like to focus particularly UNF Triple C stream of the Ecard loss and damage program. So Ecard at this moment, Ecard loss and damage team at this moment engaged to develop a long-term strategy, particularly for loss and damage program. So in terms of the short approach or short-term program, so we identified 2 years focusing COP27 and COP28. So in terms of COP27, we tried to identify the crunch issues, which are Santiago network that needs to be structured to deliver its function effectively. Second issue is the Glasgow dialogue. So we had very bad experience with SOBA expert dialogue that was held in 2018, but we are really serious to see this Glasgow dialogue as an effective ways to deliver the COP decisions. And then XCOM activities has now become very important because XCOM is implementing particularly the decision from the COP and CMA. So they are now going to develop the next new 5-year rolling work plan. That is quite important, and ICCCAD would like to provide inputs to that XCOM. So colleagues, we are very happy to share with you that ICCCAD recently submitted on Santiago network, particularly on the institutional structure, but ICCCAD highlighted the importance of academic and research institutions and how Santiago network can support as a top-down approach to these institutions, at the same time how these institutions can support the providing technical and research assistance to the vulnerable countries. So next event is the SBs that would take place in June. Before SBs, ICCCAD is planning to develop some policy brief because ICCCAD loss and damage team think that policy needs to be evidence-based. So through our research, we would like to produce 2 policy briefs before the SBs, one on Santiago network to particularly influence the workshop that would be held before the SBs, at the same time negotiation process during the SBs. So this policy brief can identify some innovative ideas that how to structure the Santiago network to deliver its function effectively. Secondly, Glasgow dialogue. If we look at the COP26 decision, there is no particular modalities for organizing Glasgow dialogue, but is this year and in collaboration with XCOM of the WIM, they would organize this Glasgow dialogue, but we need to think about right modalities so that those discussions can be resulted to the COP decisions. So ICCCAD would like to go for a research and would like to publish a policy brief before the next SBs. So with a particular intention to influence the modalities of the Glasgow dialogue. And ICCCAD as an academic institution very much involved with also CS organizations. So ICCCAD is playing very important role outside the negotiation table, particularly organizing side events, mobilizing the academic institutions and research communities. So ICCCAD would continue these side events and workshop seminars apart from the formal negotiation. So Ecard would like to also collaborate with the financial entities from different countries and would like to mobilize the fund and thinking to develop a solidarity fund for loss and damage. That would be a very innovative financial entity. Policy on the finance has become a very critical issue now. Particularly vulnerable developing countries, they want to establish a financial facility. But in Glasgow, they wanted to develop the Glasgow financial facility. But unfortunately, the developing country parties got the Glasgow dialogue. But now it is important to think how to utilize this Glasgow dialogue to result in the COP decisions. Is there a next slide, Nusrat? That is research. So would you please go back, research, Nusrat, I will, yeah. Colleagues, this is how we are thinking for this particular year of 2020, focusing COP27, but next year we are also trying to focus on loss and damage finance and particularly implementation of the Santiago network. So Ecard is at this moment closely trying to work with the COP presidencies. Ecard also trying to assist the LDC group technically so that they can take part in the negotiation process very effectively. So Ecard also trying to work with the G77 China group and where it is possible, apart from the negotiators, Ecard is closely collaborating with relevant experts so that Ecard can generate knowledge and information to the formal global policymaking processes. So with that said, colleague, I would like to stop here and we'll be happy to get any suggestions from the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hafiz Bhai. So we'll now move on to the next domain of our work, which is loss and damage research. So for that, I would like to invite Dr. Simon Anderson. He is the Senior Fellow in the Research and Learning Group at IIED, and he's currently co-chairing the IIED's Gender Equality Champions Network, and he's currently serving as the lead advisor for the Ecard loss and damage research domain. So Simon, would you please start? Thank you.
Thank you, Nusrat, and thank you, Ecard, for inviting me to be a panelist on this session. As you can see, the research team that Ecard has established to look at loss and damage from different perspectives has conceptualized loss and damage as a set of issues related to who, when, what, and how loss and damage should be addressed, and to look at loss and damage in respect to how it may be averted, minimized, and most importantly, addressed directly. And this simple diagram tries to encapsulate all of the different interactions that the Ecard team consider are important as a basis for designing the research that we'll do together and with partners. I feel particularly privileged to be part of this team and to support it in the way that I can. And I want to mention also that of course, Ecard has a long history of doing important work, both in Bangladesh and supporting work outside of Bangladesh on things related to climate adaptation. The realization that loss and damage is happening, and it's happening to the most vulnerable, of course, spurs us to really consider exactly how research is going to contribute to ways of minimizing, ways of averting, but most importantly, ways of addressing loss and damage. So we have a series of topics that we're working on currently. It's Nusrat and Fahad are the coordinators of this team, and I would like to thank them for the opportunity to put forward what the team is working on just now. But please be assured that it is This is Fahad and Nusrat, who are really the coordinators and steering this what we hope will be a very successful research team. So some of the activities, just to mention, we're looking at developing a frequently asked questions on loss and damage, like a living document that people can refer to. You've seen one of the infographics. There will be others that help to socialize research, the basis for the research concepts. We're looking at financing. We're looking at national level mechanisms, not only in Bangladesh, but elsewhere. Building collaborative links with organizations, particularly through the Least Developed Countries University Consortium on Climate Change. And we're looking at research interests that include how do we frame and learn about loss and damage so that we can address it better, how loss and damage is related to migration, forced migration, movement of people, looking at loss and damage not just in the global south, but also in the global north, and looking at non-economic losses and damages. And in addition to this, a very recent addition is that within the loss and damage research team of ICCCAD, we have established a working group on gender equality. We think that gender equality is a cross-cutting issue that needs to be incorporated across the research portfolio. So I just want to repeat my thanks to ICCCAD for this opportunity to be part of this team. And I very much look forward to the future of the work that this team will achieve.
Thank you, Simon, for explicitly explaining the research domain that the ICCCAD Loss and Damage Program is undertaking. So now I would like to request Mr. Fahad Hussein, who is currently leading the LDC's in-country domain of loss and damage. He is currently employed as a research officer at ICCCAD and is overseeing the LUC network. So we would now like to hear from Mr. Fahad.
Thank you, Nusrat. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Before starting my points on the LUC loss and on the LDC program on loss and damage, I will give a quick background on what LUC is and how this program started. So LUC is an LDC-wide LDC-wide capacity building initiative, which was established in 2017, and it was endorsed in the LDC ministerial in 2018. And currently ICCCAD is the secretariat of LUC. And from 2022, we started a project on loss and damage funded by Open Society Foundation, in which we commissioned 6 country scoping studies in 4 Asian and 4 African and 2 South Asian LDCs. And building on this project, we have started a program on loss and damage called LDC Program on Losses and Damages. And the ultimate objective of the program is to strengthen the capacity of every LDCs to address losses and damages of climate change, with a focus on the most vulnerable. The program consists of 5 levels, as you can see on the screen. The first one is awareness raising, the next one is stakeholder engagement, and the third one is capacity building, and the next one is preparation, design, feasibility testing, and feasibility testing. And the final one is drawing on financing from national and international sources. And how this program will progress is once a set of countries have completed the first level, they will move to the next level depending on the availability of funding. And the cluster of LDCs this cluster of LDCs will enter communities of practice to share learning and accelerate progress. In the first level, which is awareness raising, discussions are initiated with the LUC partner in each country and with the stakeholders. They identify in their country. They will conduct scoping studies on loss and damage to get a sense of the on how things have been happening in terms of loss and damage, such as what are the status of policies, if they have integrated loss and damage, and the scale of losses and damages happening in those countries, and the institutional structures available, and so on and so forth. And these case studies slash scoping studies will be presented in the COP in that year. For example, in the previous phase, 6 case studies were presented in Glasgow during COP26, and for the new set of countries which are at level 1 currently, they will present in Egypt at COP27. And for level 1, the output will be heightened awareness of the current and future losses and damages each country is facing, and knowledge of how to set about addressing these adverse effects of escalating climate change risks. The next level will be stakeholder engagement. The countries which have completed the first level, they will enter this level, and they will move on for outreaching to key stakeholder groups. This level is very crucial for securing buy-in from relevant stakeholders at the national and subnational levels. The output at this level will be coordinated stakeholder engagement in the exploration of ways to address current and future losses and damages, and due to adverse impacts of climate change. And the next level is capacity building. At this level, bespoke training modules tailored for each countries will be developed, piloted, and implemented in each of the countries, those which have completed the first 2 levels. The outputs at this capacity building will mainly target the government officials, and it will also target other stakeholders with loss and damage. And this stage will pave the way for integration of addressing losses and damages in the national policy cadre of national specialists who are able to conduct the tasks required to address L&D of different types at different scales. And the 4th level is preparation, design, and feasibility testing. Activities at this level will be a bit more comprehensive, which will also require more funding. And building on the outcomes of the previous 3 levels: awareness raising, engagement, and capacity building at the LAC partner level. The LAC partners will coordinate a process of consultation and collaborative design of subnational or national mechanism to address loss and damage, which will consider change policy and legislative frameworks as institutional governance, finance and fiduciary risk management, geographic focus, and gender responsive and social inclusion approaches. And comprehensive climate risk clearing approaches and associated finance options and sources will also be considered. There will be 3 pillars in this level which needs to be explored. This is based on a proposal from a recent paper by Meckler and his colleague. The 3 pillars are finance for transformational risk management to reduce risks and adapt to climate change, risk finance to provide insurance and other risk transfer and risk transfer mechanisms, and the 3rd one is curative finance for potential unavoidable loss of ecosystem and livelihood. And feasibility options for addressing economic as well as non-economic losses and damages. In terms of economic losses and damages, options for compensation and other social protection measures, short and long-term recovery and rehabilitation, rebuilding damaged infrastructure, planned relocation and assisted migration, and support for livelihood, rebuilding livelihoods, and insurance and risk transfer options will be explored. And in terms of non-economic losses and damages, feasibility options will be explored for recognition and repair of loss, active remembrance, and counseling and trauma management. The outputs at this level will be designed, costed, and feasibility tested loss and damage mechanism. And after completion of this level, we will move to the LAC partners will move to the next level, which is drawing in financing from national and international sources. We are in the process of doing level 5 activities in Bangladesh, which my colleague Saifi is leading. This is not from not as part of this program, but this is from this is by Ecard, and the learning from this project, which Saifi is leading, we will fit this into the into our program on LDC program, into a LAC loss and damage program. And at level 5, which is drawing in finance from national and international sources, and the activity of this level will be to gather finances from national and international sources to run the national mechanism, tested national mechanism, which is developed at level 4. And the output at this level will be sufficient funding for running the national mechanism. So that's all from my end on the on Ecard's work on LDCs. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer later. Thank you.
Thank you, Fahad, for elaborately explaining the LDC program that we're running on loss and damage. So now I would like to request SM Saifi Iqbal. He's currently working as a research officer and a project manager at Ecard. He has previously worked as a deputy manager monitoring and evaluation at DRRA, and is currently also leading the Ecard Bangladesh domain of loss and damage, where he's the lead focal of the multi-action partnership led by German Watch. So I would like to request Mr. Saifi to start his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nusrat. Am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're.
Yes. Thank you. So, first of all, I'd like to state that we know there is a lack of comprehensive mechanisms to address climate risk and impacts at the national level. Our country is planning to set up a comprehensive national loss and damage mechanism where civil society basically played a crucial role in working on and supporting this concept. Since the beginning of the effort to establish a national mechanism on loss and damage in Bangladesh, it is recognized that to address this matter, basically we need a whole of society approach. So this approach requires that the government institution, the private sector, the non-government organization, as well as the other actors to work together, especially from the point of operationalization and financing actions to address loss and damage. Although this idea of loss and damage mechanism has been discussed in Bangladesh since 2013, no substantial progress has been made so far due to the political challenges. Last year, however, the idea is getting momentum. Again, the Public-Private Partnership Authority, PPPAA, of the government of Bangladesh, that they want to facilitate a process to bringing all actors, especially the private sector, to work together for the purpose of establishing a national loss and damage mechanism. However, till to the date, so far the program has just been initiated, and the Public-Private Partnership Authority has proposed a 2-year-long program, which will take a step-by-step process, taking a learning by doing approach. So due to the already existing engagement, local and national level civil society and academia can play a key role in creating and strengthening these framework conditions. However, still they often lack capacity and access to adequately supported relevant process like with limited support to undertake research on loss and damage, which are generally limited in their support to get engaged in the final decision making process. Next slide, please. So what ICCCAD will do, I would like to start on that. Basically, we will work some core activities in the next coming 2 or 3 years to strengthen this process of establishing national loss and damage. So basically, in this case, our direct target group is NGOs in Bangladesh, mainly local and national NGOs. But also international NGOs with national offices in Bangladesh, and then further partners in the multi-actor partnership from policy, including policymakers, ministries and entities from the field of climate change, also academic actors from field of climate change, disaster and climate risk management, loss and damage. And then, as Mr. Fahad mentioned, that LDC Universities Consortium on Climate Change, LUC private sector, that includes insurance industry, and lastly, international development cooperation in implementing agencies. So just what ICCCAD will do in the coming years to initiate to strengthen this process. First of all, we are planning to start with some stakeholder mapping to assess the national level status quo and preparing the multi-actor partnership. And then we have a plan to empowering and strengthen local and national level civil society groups. So how can we do that? We have planned to arrange local level workshops and consultations with the most vulnerable groups. We will do some assessment of best practices to deal with loss and damage. Well, we have a plan to development of a civil society loss and damage training tool, and this training tool could be used as a general loss and damage training tool for civil society beyond the project countries. Next, we have a plan to support a new generation of researchers with the capacity to do research on climate risk. That's why we want to train them the methodologies for research on loss and damage, qualitative and quantitative research. And based on the training, we will assist them to prepare research key questions for the loss and damage implementation project. And finally, we have a plan to building and formalize the partnership, which is one of the major agendas. We have a plan to conduct regular workshop with key actors on the national level in order to support the implementation of loss and damage mechanism. And we have also planned to promote inter-ministerial cooperation and cross-sectoral collaboration, more specifically with the Public-Private Partnership Authority, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and with the Ministry of Disaster Management. Then we will do development of some necessary documents which will support the setup and implementation of national level loss and damage mechanism. And finally, we will do some assessment of possible legal framework condition, as well as the financial architecture to establish and address loss and damage. So, dear audience, that's all from my side. So over to you, Ms. Nusrat Noshin. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you, Saifi Bhai, for such an elaborate discussion on the Bangladesh domain. So the next domain that will be discussed is training and capacity building on loss and damage. This is led by Professor Mizan R. Khan. He's the Deputy Director of ICCCAD and is also a lead climate finance negotiator of the UNF Triple C. But unfortunately, he couldn't join us today. So I would like to request Dr. Haq to talk a little bit about this domain. Thank you.
Thank you, Nusrat. On behalf of Professor Mizan Khan, who is very much the person in charge of our training and capacity building across ICCCAD, but specifically also on loss and damage, I'll present a few of the points that we are working on. So firstly, we are already developing a training module on loss and damage. In particular, we will be providing training on loss and damage for COP27. Last year in COP26, we ran a session, an online training on COP in general, what is a COP, what happens at the COP, and what happened at COP26 specifically. It was a trial basis online training exercise, which worked out reasonably well. There were some hiccups, but it worked out reasonably well. And we will do it again this year for COP27. So there'll be one training module, general COP, but we will also introduce a very specific module on loss and damage for those who want to track what is happening at the COP on loss and damage. It'll start a month or so before the COP, and then it'll continue during the COP. And after the COP is over, we will bring people together to see what they've learned. And it's an online module. It is for people who don't go to the COP, but want to follow what's happening at the COP. And as I said, we did it fairly successfully last year, and we're going to repeat it again, and we'll continue repeating it every year. We are also developing capacity building modules for least developed country governments at two levels. There are capacity building of national actors at the national level associated with the LUC program that Fahad elaborated on, the capacity building part of that. And then there is also training for negotiators, and negotiator training has already started. We've been doing that for a number of years in terms of adaptation and now loss and damage, and we'll continue to do the negotiator training for the least developed country negotiators on loss and damage. And we'll be doing a pre-COP training exercise specifically for the negotiators before the COP takes place in November. It'll all be online now. We won't be doing them physically, but we have found that online training works quite well. And then we have a capacity building of in-house loss and damage experts. All our colleagues who are presenting here today are in the process of becoming experts in their own right on one aspect of loss and damage. Somebody can cover everything, so we have to choose what we want to focus on, but also be aware of all the other parts of it. And we are developing a longer-term short course on loss and damage, which we hope to be able to develop this year and offer from next year, 2023 onwards. I think that's it, Nusrat.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for elaborating on the work that we're doing. So now I'd like to request Mr. Magnus Mine Ahmed. He is currently he's the communications officer at ICCCAD. He's leading the Climate Tribune, that is a supplement of ICCCAD, and as well as he's leading the loss and damage advocacy domain. So over to you, Magnus.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Nusrat Apu. So my name is Magnus Mine Ahmed. I'm the communications focal at ICCCAD, and I'm also the co-editor of Climate Tribune. And as Nusrat Apu said, I'm the advocacy lead for our loss and damage team. So basically, through our advocacy and communications plan for our loss and damage program, we want to translate our goals into a concise and compelling case for action to policymakers. So like any other communication plan or advocacy plan, we need to compartmentalize the target audiences we want to reach, because not all advocacy plans or communication plans are as potent or as effective for all audiences, because there are certain limitations, certain hurdles we have to cross. So for that, as a team, we have already compartmentalized our target audiences into 4. It's global, then Bangladesh, then the LDCs, and then the South Asia. So we, as a team, are working on our advocacy plan for these 4 different regions, 4 different audiences. And if we get into the advocacy plan we have, it is definitely a work in progress. We are working on many aspects to put forward our advocacy plan. And one of them is that we are working on our loss and damage brochure for ICCCAD, which basically will act as a detailed reference to our past activities and our upcoming plans, which my colleagues have already shared with you today. And we are also working on our loss and damage website, which will be completely different from which will be a separate website from what we have now. And this will also act as a reference for our past activities and all the publications related to loss and damage that we already have and we will put out in the future. And we And this website will also work as a hub for interested people who want to work on loss and damage to connect with us and collaborate with us potentially. And as one of the co-editors of Climate Tribune, we as an organization, Climate Tribune is a monthly online magazine on climate-related issues that we publish in collaboration with Dhaka Tribune. So we are already working on a special issue of Climate Tribune, which is completely dedicated to loss and damage, and it will be the April issue, and it's slotted to come out on the first week of May, and it will also include a photo story, which will be a very interesting thing for our audiences. And of course, we have already had a session in Gobeshona for our loss and damage, which was a extremely important session, through which we tried to capture the ground realities and of climate change, both from local to global, through our session. And definitely this session, which we are already having, which we're briefing, we are providing an idea on what our plans are right now and what we can do for the way forward. So thank you, everyone. That is all from my side. If Nusrat Apu, you can take it away from here. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Magnus, for detailing out our plans for the loss and damage advocacy. So now I would like to move on to the loss and damage funds part. So currently I am actually taking a look, leading this work stream of Ecard loss and damage program. So I'll touch base upon some of the work that we're tracking. So as you know that positive outcome of COP26, despite the raging failure in securing the Glasgow facility for loss and damage, is the pledge by several government and philanthropies as a sign of solidarity for those in the frontline communities. And as Ecard is solidifying its framework on the loss and damage program, an important domain of work is actually keeping the track of the funds for loss and damage. So the first one that I would like to touch base upon is the fund pledged by the Scottish First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, of in initial £1 million, which was later doubled to £2 million to address loss and damage. And following this pledge, the Climate Justice Resilient Fund has launched a new partnership with the Scottish Government to deploy the initial £1 million to address loss and damage. So the Scotland and CGRF partnership actually has historic dimensions. It is the first international funding from a global North government that will explicitly support measures to address loss and damage. And it will serve as a pilot, providing a leading example to other donors regarding on how to fund and what to fund. A second stream of work funds is following the pledge from the Scottish Government. 5 more leading philanthropies contributed an initial of $3 million to support vulnerable communities hit by loss and damage. So among the philanthropies that supporting the facility are the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, the European Climate Foundation, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, the Open Society Foundations, and the Global Green Grants Fund. So during COP26, these philanthropies, in fact, invited all other parties and non-parties to the UNF Triple C to support the prospective Glasgow loss and damage facility to help meet the needs of the world's most vulnerable people. The third stream of funds that followed in was the funds pledged by the government of Wallonia. So Wallonia followed the lead of Scottish Government, pledging the sum of around €1 million for loss and damage. And the Walloon minister actually further added that implementation modalities of this fund will be coordinated between the climate ministers of both Scotland and Wallonia on how to address loss and damage. And actually the last one is the CVF V20 Multi-Donor Trust Fund. So this is one of the most recent development in the loss and damage funds. As you know that Bangladesh is currently the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, And one of the highly innovative actions taken by the CVF and the V20 finance ministers was the creation of the CVF and V20 joint multi-donor fund, with an initial funding from the CVF countries themselves, and then further contributions from international foundations and government of Germany. And the fund is currently being managed by the UNOPS on behalf of CVF and V20. And in the last board meeting of the CVF V20 multi-donor fund, which took place, I think, last month, the board has created a separate financing mechanism for loss and damage, making it the first UN fund of its kind to do so. And we're currently following up on the details on the amount or the further modalities of the fund. So basically, these are some of the loss and damage fund action tracks that we're following, and we hope that these will give a good potential to mobilize a Glasgow dialogue to kickstart the loss and damage facility into the upcoming COP. So with that being said, now I would like to request Dr. Simon Anderson and Dr. Bimal Regmi to give us some updates on the work that we're doing with the Scottish Government. So over to you, Simon, and then we can hear Dr. Regmi. Thank you.
Hello again, everybody. I just want to introduce this brief session. Some time ago, Scottish civil society recognised that with the COP coming to Glasgow, although it was a year delayed, we had the opportunity to raise awareness across Scotland of the important issues on climate change from the global south. And it was a fortunate convergence of interest to do this with the Scottish Government. So Stop Climate Chaos Scotland and the Government of Scotland partnered in a process that became known as the Glasgow Climate Dialogues. And this took place in the run-up to COP26. As you'll hear from Bimal, this was a process that also focused on loss and damage, but not just loss and damage. We also looked at issues around participation, adaptation, and just transitions. So now we're looking at how much that's government and civil society interaction process achieved, and we're looking to learn lessons, and Bimal is helping us in that process. So I'll turn it over to you, Bimal, please.
Thank you, Simon. So can you hear me? Yes, good. So hello, everyone. Dr. Salim and all the panelists and esteemed participants. I was really delighted to be in the panel. Thank you so much for ICCCAD for providing me this opportunity. And so as Simon said, so we are looking, I'm especially looking into this particular assignment to really see the effectiveness of the Glasgow Climate Dialogues that took place in run-up to COP26. So there were key thematic areas. So as Simon said, this is a collaboration of Scottish Government and the Global South, especially the civil society organization. So there were key thematic areas where the discussion took place, and the thematic areas were led by both southern as well as northern organizations that have interest and aspirations to really see the loss and damage being expedited in COP26. So these dialogues that were organized in access and participation and voice, adaptation, loss and damage, and just transition in the four thematic areas. This was designed to provide opportunities for stakeholders from the Global South and civil society and government, especially to raise their position and voice on the key negotiation areas and develop common and shared understanding on these. And these, the anticipation was the dialogues will provide a platform for Global South, civil society organization and government, and especially look into how these agendas can be put forward and expanded in terms of really raising voices of the Global South. So I am now currently involved in this appraisal to really look into COP26 outcome in light to the expectation that was set in the Glasgow climate dialogues and the panel discussion that happened, and the discussion that was concentrated in the 4 major themes. And in doing this, I looked into the major outcomes of these 4 climate dialogues, the materials related to it. I had the opportunity to interact with many of the panelists and the speakers in the dialogues, as well as some of the representatives from the Global South who were in the negotiation, as well as representative of the civil society. So the expectation from the dialogue on loss and damage. So I just want to focus on loss and damage this time because of the time given. So loss and damage is basically in the Global South, it is intervened within the issues of fairness and equity. So the acknowledgement of the shared responsibility for loss and damage that was expected that it should be expressed through a solidarity fund that support financial, moral, technical to those who need it. So that was one of the expectations. The second was it should be formalized within UNF Triple C as one of the important pillars besides mitigation and adaptation. The third was basically trying to look into the understanding the complexity of loss and damage and necessity, especially to take urgent actions to help the developing and least developed countries to deal with the loss and damage issues, and also to really talk about the national mechanism or to have these kind of mechanism to really address loss and damage, which needs to be supported through the UNF Triple C. So you all know that what was the outcome of Glasgow Climate Pact. So the progress on loss and damage, there was some progress on loss and damage. You can here look into the text. So in terms of acknowledgement, basically loss and damage was acknowledged for the first time. And everybody realized that this is a serious issue and that needs to be addressed. Although the level of realization, the level of sensitivity is very, very diverse. One of the things that we can say is, because I gathered from the interaction, is that the progress on Santiago network on loss and damage is quite appreciating. Everybody appreciated. And the way forward on Glasgow dialogue on loss and damage that was previously mentioned by Dr. Salim, it is quite an it has opened actually the windows for further dialogue on financing related to loss and damage. And one of the very interesting thing, as Nusrat also mentioned, the financial contribution from the Scotland and other countries, including the philanthropic organization and the recent setup of financing from various groups. I think that is one of the very, very encouraging part of the whole COP26 negotiation and outside discussion that helped to cut through the political discussion and put financial agenda in the spotlight of the COP26. And it will be one of the major spotlight of COP26 that we have to really work on. Nevertheless, I think loss and damage will be continued and pushed as major issues and agenda of the least developed countries as well as all the vulnerable developing countries. So that is also one of the progress that we can see. So there were a lot of bottlenecks at COP26. So based on the expectation versus what was achieved, a lot of frustration, especially from the LDCs, developing countries, and majority of the civil society from the Global South were really, disheartened or really thought they were betrayed because the way negotiation, proceeded and the way some rich nations, acted to hold the discussion or to hold the decision on finance for loss and damage to be, holded, and especially laying pressure for the developing countries and, agreeing to whatever text was, proposed. So that was quite frustrating, and it really created a level of, frustration and among the global South, and especially civil society organization and everyone. We really aspired to take this, climate financing agreement on loss and damage forward. And there was some really interesting quote, quite, moral quote, and quite, very sensitive quotes that really touched, the media, social media, and the newspaper. So overall, I think the way the global South, civil society and negotiator thought that loss and damage will be, move forward, it didn't really happen. So as a way forward, there has been discussion on how should we go forward from here. As Dr. Salim said, the COP26 has given that platform which we need to really utilize and take these sides opportunities. So we don't really have time for preparation. So the preparation should already happen, and we should start the preparation, especially working with the presidency and Egyptian government, so that the preparatory activities can happen from now onwards. It is really important that we really be clear on these agendas that was left out in COP26. The way forward is just to, have a good alliance, have a good advocacy among least developed countries, among developing countries, bring Scotland and these leading countries in front, so that they could really put moral pressure on the developed countries for really committing something on loss and damage. And the finance on loss and damage is really, really important. So I think the way forward is basically we need to be very, very proactive and just take this, energy and momentum as an opportunity, not just because we lost something. There are so much of opportunities that we can do in Egypt. And since Egypt is a adaptation COP, so I think loss and damage decisions has to be, pushed for something on financing on loss and damage that we aim for COP26. So these were the initial results on loss and damage. So I yet need to, finish this appraisal. So I'll stop here, and Simon has raised hand, so I'll let Simon speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Bimal, and thank you for coming in and doing this very useful appraisal. It's I just want to conclude by saying that, of course, what we're discussing here are interim results of Bimal's work, and also these what the appraisal will conclude will also be influenced by the feedback that we get here, and by the feedback we'll get at a focus group discussion next week, and then the report will be submitted to the Scottish Government. I just want to say that the process, the dialogue process that we engaged in during all of last year was supported incredibly by Ecard, by Salim, of course, and others, but also by partners from other least developed countries. We had very strong participation on climate justice, on just transitions from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, from people in Mozambique. And I think the process itself was a very interesting one, because it really allowed government and civil society to learn together and to learn from a wide set of sources, including strong voices from the Global South. So as a model, I think the Glasgow Climate Dialogues is worth considering as something that might be used in further years, future years. And so I would recommend it to you, and I've put in the chat links to some of the documentation and recording of the sessions that's already available. So thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss this with you, and we look forward to feedback.
Thank you, Simon and Dr. Regmi for this wonderful discussion. So now I would like to request all the attendees, if you have any question, please feel free to raise your hand. So if you have any questions for the panelists.
Let me come in, Nusrat, while people are thinking of their questions and raising their hands. And there are a couple of already in the chat box, which we might pick up as well. So let me just give an overview of how we are approaching the issue of loss and damage. And I will divide it into what I call the pragmatic end of the spectrum, where the thing is happening, we have to deal with it, whether it's real climate change, whether we believe in climate change or don't believe. When we are suffering a flood or a wildfire, we have to deal with it. And so there is that pragmatic side. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there is the political side, which is highly politically sensitive, where we are asking for finance from the polluters. And even though we're not allowed to say the words compensation and liability, those are the paradigms under which these demands are being made. They can be given in terms of solidarity. That's not a problem. We're happy to be given finance in terms of solidarity, but even that is not forthcoming in the UNFCCC process. What has happened, and this is a very good example, is that the people of Scotland and the government of Scotland, which is not a signatory to the UNFCCC, by the way, but it is a government with a budget, with a parliament, with a climate fund of its own, that has stepped up. And the First Minister of Scotland was very clear in saying that Scotland is a beneficiary of the Industrial Revolution, and they recognize that there have been the impacts of the Industrial Revolution, particularly through emissions of greenhouse gases from fossils, that have caused problems for people. And the government of Scotland has put in the money that they have put in very explicitly in the form of reparations. This is not charity. This is not for adaptation. It is meant for helping the victims of loss and damage. And that is really what we are seeking, is to support the victims of actual loss and damage that is happening. And I'll just share a quick use of nuances of language. The use of the term loss and damage is very UNFCCC specific. It's the phrase that is used in the UNFCCC process that we set up the Warsaw International Mechanism on, that we now have the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage. We have the Glasgow Dialogue on Finance for Loss and Damage. The term loss and damage is very much what we will do in the UNFCCC process to deal with it. Technical assistance, research, already we've agreed. Santiago Network. Finance, we have not yet agreed. We've just agreed to talk. There'll be a dialogue for 3 more years. We hope that that will not mean 3 years of just blah, blah, blah talking, but actually 1 year of talk and doing something by COP27. We shall see whether we can do that or not. And then at the more practical end, particularly if you have been watching or reading the results of the IPCC Working Group 2, you will see that they refer to losses and damages from impacts of human-induced climate change. They use the term losses and damages, not loss and damage. They don't capitalize the L as we do in the UNFCCC, and they don't capitalize the D as we do in the UNFCCC. The UNFCCC is capital L, loss, and capital D, damage. That's the phrase in the UNFCCC process. In the IPCC, it's small l, small d, losses and damages, which is a depiction of the reality. This is undeniable. In fact, some of the countries, developed countries, tried to prevent the use of the term losses and damages in the approval process of Working Group 2, and the scientists strongly fought back, saying this is absolutely evident that losses and damages are happening. They're attributable to human-induced climate change, and therefore this cannot be denied. They cannot be removed. The words could not be removed. So, but the words are losses and damages with a small l and a small d. Okay, so that's a nuance. Most people don't understand the difference, but it is a difference. One is political, at a global political decision-making process, the loss and damage with the capital L and the capital D, and losses and damages with the small l and small d is practical. It's pragmatic. It's happening on the ground. We have to deal with it. Even rich countries are having to deal with it, whether they like it or not. And so we can position ourselves on any part of that spectrum that we wish to do. You can position yourself at the political end and seek reparations or compensation, or you can position yourself at the pragmatic end and say, I'm not into the politics, but I want to do something about the problem, and let us do something about it. And we are soliciting all groups, all countries, to find a way to find a comfort level on that spectrum and join the process, because loss and damage is now becoming a bigger and a bigger problem, and we really do need to address it at a much more urgent basis than we have been able to do so far. So I hope that that explanation gives a sort of nuanced approach to the different ends of the spectrum of what we mean by loss and damage, and how much of it is politically sensitive and how much need not be politically sensitive. I see a very good question from Christopher from Vanuatu. Christopher, would you like to unmute yourself and put your question? Can Christopher unmute?
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that. Yes, the question is about how we can really start to look outside the UNF Triple C, which is absolutely failing to address the impacts on fundamental human and environmental rights. There is a campaign which has gained incredible momentum from last year to bring the issue of climate change to the International Court of Justice through a resolution this year at the General Assembly. And it would be wonderful to see how ICCCAD programs could support really this Global South initiative. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you, Christopher. That's an excellent question. I'll say a few words myself, and then I'll invite my colleague Hafiz Khan, who is a lawyer, to perhaps supplement. So you're absolutely right. The UNFCCC process has failed. One of the major reasons for failure is that the UNFCCC can only make decisions by consensus. And when the polluter is at the table and the victims of pollution are demanding compensation, the polluter can say no. And that's it, no decision. And that's what we've been facing for the last umpteen years. They can only, and that's what happened in COP. So we wanted a finance facility. They said, no finance facility, but we'll have a dialogue. We'll talk to you for 3 more years. We won't do anything, but we'll let you talk about it for 3 years. And so the UNFCCC is the wrong place to hold countries that are doing bad things to account, because the bad countries are at the table and they can veto everything. They have a veto on everything. And so the UNFCCC is not a place to be able to bring these kinds of cases. But legal courts are, and you are seeing now a number of cases under national jurisdictions in a variety of countries, at least half a dozen countries, Germany, Netherlands. Netherlands actually had a good victory in the courts in the United States, in Australia, and other countries. There are cases going under national law jurisdictions where citizens of a country are challenging their own governments for failing to protect them. But at the international level, in the International Court of Justice, you need governments to be the ones that put cases at the International Court of Justice. And it's very good to see that some of the island countries now are looking at going to the International Court of Justice for some kind of remedy, some kind of at least an advisory judgment that says that these are wrong and under international law. I'll let my colleague Hafiz Khan add something if you wish. Hafiz.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Christopher, thank you so much to hearing you. So we are really excited to hear your initiative. We are already aware about your Vanuatu's initiative for bringing the case to ICJ. So for your kind information, Ecard also thinking to some sort of litigations. Particularly, Ecard is interested to work on the attribution science and to identify the nature of losses and damages that vulnerable communities are facing. So, Christopher, we would be very happy to have some further discussion how Ecard can provide your great idea to bring the issue before ICJ. So, we are very much looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Hafiz.
More question from Dr. Harmant Ocha. So would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question, Dr. Ocha?
You have to unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
Thank you so much, Nusrat and Professor Haq. I guess I had put two specific questions while I was listening to the panelists. One was about capacity. Was trying to understand, what sort of capacity gap actually exists across different actor groups, and what is your experience, on the ground when there is no capacity, how process is blocked or not moving well, so what is the consequence of that capacity gap? Just trying to understand in terms of the reality on the ground so that we can pursue it better for any funders and supporters. So that is one question. And second one was about, I put in the chat about advocacy. And I was thinking of Bangladesh itself. Are we targeting any particular policy, any particular government agencies, with regard to loss and damage? So it would be good to have some sense of what is actually happening on advocacy front, in terms of the agency, the policy, those sort of things that we are targeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hemant, for those excellent questions. So let me try and attempt to answer them, and I'll invite colleagues if they wish to come in and share some thoughts as well. And I see that Saifi Iqbal has also responded to your comments in the chat box as well. So on the level of awareness and capacity, we are at zero. Okay, so loss and damage is a new topic, a new subject. Very few people know about it. So the very first step we have to do is to raise people's awareness of it. And that, if you remember the chart that my colleague Fahad showed of building capacity at the least developed country level, the first year is just raising awareness because it's a new subject. Nobody knows what it means. So people need to know what it means. So we need to engage with different stakeholders, explain it to them in ways that they can understand. And as I said, the practical aspects of it are more easy to explain. Everybody's suffering from impacts of climate change, more floods, more cyclones, more droughts, more heat waves. And those are now don't need to be explained anymore. They're happening. People are seeing them. They're suffering from them. So that bit is easy to show. The question then is making an attribution to human-induced climate change, which is a bit more difficult. And as Hafiz just said, that's one of the aspects of research that we will be doing in ICCCAD, is enhancing, which with other scientists from around the world. We are not climate scientists ourselves, but we have a very good network of climate scientists who will be working on the attribution side. So can you say that this cyclone was caused because of climate change? The answer is now yes, actually. It used to be no, but it is now yes. And we can say that. And so we need to be getting better at this, what we call attribution science, to be able to make the connection between what people are seeing and suffering and the fact that it is happening because of climate change. Those are two things that used to be difficult to prove. Now they have become more easy to prove. In the case of Bangladesh, as I said, we've been working on this for a number of years yet. So Bangladesh has gone up several steps of the ladder that Fahad mentioned. Awareness was created some years ago. Institutional arrangements and discussions have been going on between different governments. Again, in every government, climate change has started by being part of the Ministry of Environment. But climate change cannot be dealt by ministries of environment. It's too big a problem for a Ministry of Environment, which is usually a regulatory ministry, to tackle. They can't. And so at one point, every country has to realize that climate change is bigger than something that the Ministry of Environment alone can tackle. It has to be cross-government. It has to be run by the president or the prime minister's office. It has to involve the finance ministry. It has to involve the planning ministry. It has to involve the disaster management ministry. And that has already taken place in Bangladesh, by the way. So Bangladesh climate change is very cross-cutting. All the ministries are now aware of it. And for the loss and damage national mechanism, the institution that has been that has taken the initiative is a newly created public-private partnership authority under the Prime Minister's office. And the head of that institution has taken the initiative to bring together all the government agencies, relevant government agencies, and non-governmental actors, because the institution is a public-private partnership authority. So they want to bring partners from inside government, partners from outside government, and particularly outside government are the NGO sector, who are working with vulnerable communities, the academic sector that my center represents, and we have a large number of researchers working on this in Bangladesh, and also the private sector, particularly the insurance industry, who are already getting involved in some aspects of loss and damage insurance. So this is what is happening in Bangladesh. We are hoping to develop a 2-year action research program involving all the partners to see what can be done, figure out what can be done. And then once at the end of 2 years, we'll take stock and see if something like a national mechanism on loss and damage can be designed and taken forward with appropriate legislation and policy making at the government level. So we are at the beginning of this 2-year journey at the moment in Bangladesh. But let me invite any of my colleagues who want to come in on this. Saifi or Hafiz?
Thank you, Dr. Akhsar. Just I would like to add something. So the Public-Private Partnership Authority, basically they will be doing this following the 5 steps. So first step, they will develop a roadmap to establish this national mechanism on loss and damage. Then they will assess the legal and institutional mandates for establishing it. In the next step, they will try to determine the structure and functions of including rules of business. In step 4, they will pilot test the national mechanism in some selected districts or upajilas, which are basically vulnerable to climate change. And their final step will be establishing this national mechanism on loss and damage. And ICCCAD will coordinate with the Public-Private Partnership Authority in this regard. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Bimal has his hand up as well. Bimal?
Yeah, thank you, Salim. So I think I agree with Salim just for a few of the challenges that we are facing in Nepal also is basically we have mainstream agencies like Ministry of Home Affairs and the disaster agencies whom I think we need to really work together, because they are the ones who are looking into the disaster sectors. And in terms of really having evidences on the attribution, because we already have evidences, many evidences, but I think because they are the focal agencies on disaster, so it is, we are trying to really work with the authority and agencies there so that they internalize this process. They really are sensitized. Otherwise, what is happening is because they argue on damage and loss, and they argue on these natural disasters. And sometimes it's quite, difficult for the climate community to really communicate with the higher level, political authority. That's why the government has, come up with a national framework, which really try to define loss and damage in the national context, provided some, information on the attributions. Attribution is difficult, as Dr. Salim said, but we have to really strengthen or improve the science of climate attribution. And I think the best we can do is partner with the mainstream disaster communities so that they are on board. Thank you.
Absolutely correct, Bimal. So the most relevant institutions at a national level.
Thank you, everyone. So if we...
Go ahead.
Kindly raise your hand, please. Okay, if not, then we will like to move on to the closing part. So now I would like to request Dr. Haq to give.
Thank you very much, Nusrat, and thank you, everybody. Can I ask everyone to turn the cameras on for a moment so we can take a group photograph, as is traditional in these meetings nowadays? So please turn your cameras on and let us take a group photograph. First of all, let me thank all my colleagues who presented and the participants who raised comments in the chat box and ask questions live as well. This has been a very stimulating exercise from our side. Very happy to share what we are planning to do. And one of the key elements of what we plan to do is partnerships. And we use the example of our partnership with, I would call it, the people of Scotland and the government of Scotland as a very good example. We've been doing this now for well over a year now. We did it well before COP26, and we saw some results in COP26 of that engagement. And that's the kind of thing that we are very interested in doing, and very happy to collaborate with Christopher, with the General Assembly initiative and the ICC Advisory Opinion Initiative. We would very much support that and see what we can do to help. And so one of our key principles of the work that we will be doing on loss and damage going forward is we simply can't do it ourselves. It's just too big for any a single organization or even a single country to do. So we need to be looking for partnerships. Wherever we find allies, whoever they may be, we welcome them. And as I said, if they are willing to be, politically correct and not be politically controversial, they can do work. They can still work on loss and damage. If they're willing to be politically controversial and hold polluters to account, we'll do that as well. So we cover the spectrum. We are very much advocacy for polluters to pay, and we'll continue to do that. But we are also pragmatic and say people who don't want to fight polluters, but who are suffering the impacts, need to know how to deal with those impacts. And as it happens, a very interesting feature of that part of the spectrum is that rich countries don't know how to deal with the impacts either. Okay, so sometimes poor countries like Bangladesh know better than countries like Germany and the United States. As you know, Germany lost nearly 200 lives from a relatively small flash flood that took place last year. Bangladesh has 10 times bigger floods and we don't lose that many lives. Okay, and so Germany can learn from Bangladesh how to minimize loss and damage from the impacts of climate change, because impacts are happening everywhere, even in the rich countries. So the practical end of the spectrum, where we can share knowledge on what to do to deal with the impacts, is a very safe space for everybody. And one of the results of COP26 and the dialogue as well is that this is now open for dialogue. It used to be very sensitive. Many UN agencies would not even dare talk about loss and damage because it was perceived to be a sensitive topic. LASO has made it untabooed. I call it has made it halal. In Muslims, we only eat halal food, so it is now halal or kosher for the Jews. And so we can talk about it. And so many more people are now coming on to the platform of wanting to learn about loss and damage. We need to reach out to them. We need to bring them on board. We need to explain the different activities that can take place and see where they can fit and be part of it. And I'll end by just mentioning one group with whom we have already established a very good connection. That's the youth group. As you know, the Fridays for Future, a youth initiative that is now a global initiative with millions of kids coming out of school every Friday, emulating the example of Greta Thunberg, who started doing this several years ago when she sat in front of the Swedish parliament with a placard all by herself, skipping school. And that has created this movement, global movement, really global movement. And the youth are taking this issue up. And they are, the Youth Fridays for Future are taking loss and damage as a major issue to do advocacy on. And one of the things we're talking to them about is do fundraising for. So at sometime in the near future, they will do one of their Fridays for Future campaigns. They will donate their lunch money to loss and damage, but they need a fund to take that money. Who are they going to give that money to? So we are now looking at options for a fund that will accept money from school kids all over the world, including developing countries. They'll donate their pocket money in terms of taka or rupees or whatever the local currency is, and put that money into a fund to help the victims of loss and damage. School kids are aware, school kids want to do something, school kids are prepared to put their hands in their pocket and come up with some money. We need to shame the global leaders who are not doing the same to do that. And so let me end there by thanking everybody for joining us, and I hope you found it an interesting expenditure of your time with us. Thank you very much.